This is not the first time you've seen the mirror, but this time, it looked back. Something subtle shifted, not loud, not violent, just a quiet click, like a lock turning after years of silence. You don't remember the first time you crossed this threshold, but the mirror does. It has been watching the loops you walk through, the same mornings, the same conversations, the same invisible rhythm disguised as life. You've called it routine, they've called it normal, but the mirror has always known it was a ritual. Most people never notice the pattern. They spin through timelines like a song on repeat. They mistake movement for progress. They confuse noise with meaning. They live inside loops that were written for them, not by them. But something different happened to you. A glitch, a silence, a moment when the air around you felt too still, as if reality held its breath. And in that breath, you felt it, the mirror's gaze. You've walked these streets before. You've had these conversations. But this time, the words didn't sit the same. The colors felt slightly off. The laughter around you rang hollow, not because it changed, but because you did. Recognition isn't random. It's a memory surfacing from a deeper layer of your being. A memory older than this version of you. Fractal, ancient, precise. You are not waking up, you're remembering. There's a reason why so many stay trapped. Because the loop doesn't look like a prison. It looks like comfort. It smells like safety. It whispers, this is just how things are. And so, they repeat. Birth, distraction, sleep, scroll, consume, obey. A ritual disguised as freedom. But your loop cracked, and the mirror slipped through that crack. You might not have words for it. You might not be able to explain it. But the feeling is undeniable. The sense that something underneath reality is trying to speak. The pulse behind the visible world. A transmission, not in language, but in resonance. When the mirror looked back, it wasn't showing your reflection. It was showing your frequency. Not your name, not your face, your signal. The one buried beneath noise. The one most people forget exists. The one you carried before you were ever told who to be. This moment is the first test. Because once you see the loop sees you. Once you recognize the script starts to dissolve. That's why so few cross this threshold. Because to break the loop is to break the self they built around it. And yet, here you are, hearing this, not by accident, not by algorithm, but because something inside you whispered, enough. You didn't come here for entertainment. You came here because the mirror called you. And this time, you answered. You were never meant to be another echo in their loop. You were meant to become the signal that breaks it. If these words found you, it's because your frequency rose above the static. The mirror doesn't seek everyone. It only reflects those who are ready to remember. This is the beginning. The fracture before the rewrite. The silence before the storm of clarity. Type these words not for me, but as a declaration to yourself. I see the mirror, not as a comment, as an alignment, a ritual, a signal to the timeline that you are awake. Most people don't see the architecture of their loop, not because it's hidden, but because it's familiar. And what's familiar becomes invisible. The loop isn't made of walls or bars. It's built out of patterns, tiny, precise, repeating codes stitched into daily life. The alarm clock that rings the same, the thoughts that recycle themselves like broken echoes, the faces that appear but never look. You wake, you move, you repeat, and the loop smiles. They call it normal life. But normal is just a word the loop invented to make itself sound harmless. They convince themselves they're walking forward, but their feet are tracing circles on the same ground. Like dancers performing a choreography they've forgotten they memorized. They dream of breaking free, but the loop gives them new distractions wrapped in shining paper, new headlines, new goals, new desires, but the mechanism remains untouched. You've felt this before, haven't you? The strange weight in the air, as if you're standing at the edge of something vast, and yet everything around you moves like clockwork. This is the machinery of timelines, not the grand moments, but the subtle ticks. Routines are rituals, habits are spells, and most people don't realize they're casting the same one every day. The loop doesn't need permission. It needs only one thing, your silence. Watch closely, and you'll see how it hides. The loop dresses itself in familiarity. It gives you jobs that feel safe, relationships that numb instead of ignite, opinions that echo louder than truth, and over time, it teaches you to confuse stillness with stagnation and safety with sleep. They call this maturity, but in truth, it is a carefully engineered trance. You are surrounded by people who walk with open eyes and closed sight. They talk of goals, of plans, of dreams, but their steps return to the same place they started, over and over. They don't notice, because the loop rewards obedience with the illusion of movement. It gives them breadcrumbs of change, never the whole loaf, enough to keep them hopeful, never enough to wake them up. And when one of them dares to look around, to sense that something's not right, the loop whispers softly, "Don't question it. You're just tired. Go back." But not you. You started asking the forbidden question, why does everything feel the same, even when it changes? That's when the loop cracked. When your consciousness became the observer, the timeline flinched. The observer effect isn't just a scientific idea, it's a spiritual weapon. Reality rearranges itself when you stop playing and start watching. The moment you see the architecture, you're no longer just part of it. You become a variable, a frequency anomaly, and the loop doesn't like anomalies. Understand this, the loop doesn't need to chain your body, it chains your perception. Because once perception is locked, the body follows willingly. That's why they stay. That's why most never leave. They're not trapped in a cell, they're trapped in a lullaby. A gentle, numbing rhythm that convinces them the walls don't exist. And when you start to awaken, the loop doesn't fight you with force. It fights you with comfort. It offers old habits wrapped in new excuses. It makes the known feel safer than the unknown. It whispers, "Don't make it complicated, just be like everyone else." But everyone else isn't free. They're just synchronized. Look around you now. The furniture, the routine, the endless scroll, the familiar arguments. These are not coincidences, they are architecture. Invisible scaffolding built around the version of you the loop prefers. And yet, here you are, eyes wide open, breathing in the strangeness, seeing how the structure fits together, how the ritual repeats itself, how it wants you to play your part again. But this time, something's different, because this time, you're noticing, and that tiny fracture of awareness is how loops die, not with explosions, but with a quiet, steady gaze. The loop cannot hold you once you begin to see its edges. Awareness is solvent, observation is rebellion. This is why they stay, but you won't. Because once you've seen the architecture, you'll never mistake the walls for home again. The mirror was never made of glass. It was made of awareness. It breathes, it listens, it waits. And when you finally turned toward it, it moved. You didn't imagine it. The shift in the air, the pulse under your skin, the weight of a gaze you couldn't locate. It wasn't madness. It was the mirror waking up. Most think a mirror is a passive thing, an object, a reflection. But this mirror does not copy your image. It amplifies your frequency. It doesn't reflect your face. It reflects your state. Every thought you whisper, every emotion you bury, every pattern you rehearse without knowing it records it. It remembers. It responds. That déjà vu that made your spine tighten. That stranger who said the exact thing you were just thinking. That night when time felt like it folded. Those weren't coincidences. They were pings, echoes of your own signal returning from the other side. The mirror doesn't speak in words. It speaks in synchronicities, fractals, repetitions, glitches. It's not trying to scare you. It's trying to see if you'll notice. For most people, the mirror stays quiet. They never look long enough. They pass by their reflection every day but never once see it. But you did. And the moment you saw it, the mirror stopped being passive. It became interactive. Every breath, every decision, every subtle shift in your inner state is now echoed back through the architecture of your reality. That's why lately, everything has felt strange, like the world is whispering in a language you almost understand. Because it is. Reality itself has tilted, not because it changed, but because you did. The mirror isn't just in front of you, it's around you. The walls, The silence, the faces, the storms, all of it. A living feedback loop, adjusting itself to your frequency. Here's what no one told you. Mirrors do not awaken randomly. They awaken for those who begin to carry coherent frequency. You've cracked the surface of the loop. You've disturbed the script. And the mirror, ancient, sentient, precise, has turned its attention to you. You are not watching it anymore. It's watching you back. The way the wind shifts when you step outside. The songs that play exactly when your thoughts burn. The timing of footsteps. The flicker of a streetlight. The silence that lingers just a little too long. These are not weird little things. They are signals, threaded into the lattice of the quantum field. You've entered the dialogue between your consciousness and reality. You just didn't know you were already speaking. And here's the part that changes everything. The mirror doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you are. Not the mask, not the words, not the performance, the frequency beneath. If you carry fear, it will mirror fear. If you carry doubt, it will paint the world in hesitation. If you carry coherence, the world around you rearranges itself like iron dust around a magnet. This is how timelines bend. This is how destinies rewrite themselves. You are in the in-between now, the threshold where the loop ends and the mirror begins. Most turn away at this point. They feel the presence watching them back and call it paranoia. They retreat into noise, into distraction, back to the loop where nothing looks back, but not you. Because once the mirror responds, once it breathes back into you, there's no going back. You've initiated the dialogue, and whether you answer or not, the conversation has already begun. Listen carefully. The mirror does not shout. It whispers, and its whispers are tailored to the frequency you carry. This is not about belief. It's about resonance. It's about the law beneath all other laws. The observer and the observed are entangled. This is where the ordinary ends, and the quantum begins. I remember the first time the mirror found me. It wasn't some grand cosmic event. No light splitting the sky. No divine choir. Just silence. A silence so sharp it cut through everything I thought I was. I was sitting alone, surrounded by a life that looked complete from the outside. A carefully arranged set of patterns, predictable, familiar, safe. But in that silence, something whispered beneath the noise. Not with words, with weight. And I realized I wasn't living, I was looping. The loops are not cages made of steel. They're made of stories. Tiny, precise, invisible stories that run like hidden code beneath your choices. You think you're deciding, but really, the script decided years ago. I traced it back. Every reaction, every decision, every inevitable turn, and beneath it all was a single mechanism: pain. Pain isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in the fabric of your daily rhythm. It wears the mask of your name. It hums quietly inside the words you repeat when no one's listening. I discovered how the system works. It doesn't trap you by force. It anchors you. Neural, emotional, energetic anchors buried so deep, you mistake them for your personality. The loop lives in those anchors. It breathes through the moments you avoid. It feeds on everything you convinced yourself was just how life is. The mirror is not external. It's the feedback layer of your consciousness. What you carry inside becomes the architecture outside. I didn't understand it at first. I kept trying to fix the surface, change jobs, change cities, change faces, but nothing changed because the anchor was still there. And until I dissolved the anchor, every new timeline was just an old loop with new wallpaper. That was the night I understood something most never realize. Repetition isn't failure. Repetition is the system's way of asking, will you finally look beneath it? Every loop is a map. Every pattern is a doorway. But you have to stop trying to escape it and start listening to it. When I finally turned inward, the mirror didn't show me the world. It showed me the script I had been following my entire life. The triggers I defended, the fears I called preferences, the comfort I confused with destiny. I learned the mechanism step by step. Trigger, an emotional signature from the past. Anchor, a pattern built around avoiding that pain. Loop A, timeline reinforcing the same script. Mirror response, reality, reflecting the frequency beneath. This is why most never leave, because they keep repainting the loop instead of breaking the anchor. They change surface variables but ignore the core frequency. When I broke my first anchor, everything went quiet, terrifyingly quiet. It was like the world held its breath to see what I'd choose next. That silence wasn't emptiness. It was the timeline resetting, waiting for a new signal. That was the night I understood the most dangerous truth. Reality doesn't mirror your desires. It mirrors your coherence. You don't get what you want, you get what you are. And that realization was the beginning of everything unraveling. I'm telling you this because I know where you are right now. I know the disorientation, the uncanny sense that everything is too familiar, the mirror's attention pressing softly against the edges of your reality. You're not broken, you're remembering. And when you remember, the loop begins to lose its grip. I'm not here as a teacher. I'm here as someone who's walked through the same invisible door you're standing at. I fell, I stumbled, I looped, until I didn't. If this transmission is vibrating inside your chest right now, that isn't coincidence. It's a call to coherence. This is where your timeline begins to shift, not by force, but by frequency. This is also where I offer something different. Not a plea, not a demand, but an invitation. When souls gather on the same frequency, the mirror amplifies the signal. This is why these transmissions exist, to build a timeline that does not loop, but expands. So if you feel that pull, that silent nod from somewhere beyond, then don't just watch, join the frequency. Subscribe, not as a follower, but as a signal carrier, a node in a web of awakened timelines. Because the mirror is alive, and it listens when we align. When the mirror starts to speak back, the timeline begins to crack. Not with explosions, not with chaos, but with silence that doesn't belong. At first, it's subtle. A word you've heard before, spoken in a place it shouldn't be. A stranger's eyes lingering one heartbeat too long. A song that plays at the exact moment your thought surfaces. A pattern repeating so precisely, it stops feeling like chance. These are not coincidences. These are pressure points. The timeline, straining. You've entered a realm most never even know exists. They live within the loop, content in its scripted rhythm. But once your awareness shifts, your frequency no longer fits the architecture it once obeyed. Reality, now aware of your gaze, starts to tremble. The cracks aren't punishments, they're invitations. Each fracture is a choice point. Each glitch is a door that was always there, but invisible, until your eyes began to remember. People around you may not understand what's happening. They'll tell you it's stress, coincidence, overthinking. But deep inside, you know something ancient is unfolding. You'll notice the texture of silence change. It becomes thick, as if time itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if you'll turn away or step through. You'll feel connections dissolve without reason, people fading from your orbit like mist burning off at sunrise. This isn't loss, it's frequency divergence. As your signal rises, the world that matched your old frequency starts to fall away. The cracks are the in-between. They don't belong to the old loop, and they don't yet belong to the new timeline either. That's why it feels lonely here, weightless, unstable. But that instability is proof that the mirror heard you. The system has one defense: friction. It will try to pull you back into the familiar. Not with claws, with comfort. Old habits will resurface, wrapped in soft memories. Old emotions will feel louder, as if begging to be believed again. You'll question everything, not because you're lost, but because the loop is losing you. Long pause. One breath in. This is the razor's edge where many turn back. They crave the warmth of the familiar script. They convince themselves it was all a dream. They fall back into synchronized sleep, telling themselves it was just a phase. But you didn't come here to sleep. You came here to rewrite. The cracks are not dangers. They are access points. This is where timelines bend. Your reality will start to feel lighter in some places and unbearably heavy in others. The light places are portals. The heavy places are anchors begging to be dissolved. Listen closely. The mirror doesn't scream. It breathes. It waits. Every time the loop tries to seduce you with nostalgia, the mirror sends another fracture, a quiet, precise reminder. You've already outgrown this. The cracks are not random. They appear exactly where your soul has waited longest. In conversations that no longer satisfy, in jobs that feel too small, in dreams you once worshipped but can no longer wear. The structure is not breaking down to destroy you. It's breaking down to make space for what could never fit inside the loop. The danger here is not the crack. It's the temptation to patch it up, to pretend it didn't appear, to tell yourself it's fine, that it's easier to sleep than to cross. But every time you ignore a crack, it closes, and the loop tightens. Every time you follow it, the walls weaken, and the mirror steps closer. So, if the world begins to feel strange, let it. If silence grows louder, listen. If everything familiar starts to fade, don't chase it back. Because the cracks aren't breaking you, they're breaking the script. This is the part no one warns you about. The moment when the cracks stop being lines on the wall and start running through you. When the mirror stops observing and starts dissolving everything that isn't real. You thought the loop was the prison, but you'll discover something harder. Your identity was the cell door, and for years, you were the one keeping it locked. The identity collapse isn't gentle. It doesn't arrive with clarity and calm. It arrives like a storm in reverse, not tearing the world apart, but tearing the false self out of you. You'll wake up one day, and the things you used to cling to, the opinions, the titles, the stories you wrapped around your name will start to sound foreign, unstable, hollow. It's not that you've lost your identity. It's that the mask no longer fits. I remember when it happened to me. There was a night I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, but the reflection looking back felt like a stranger wearing my face. Same features, different frequency. That night, I whispered my own name, and it didn't answer. That's what collapse feels like, the space between the name and the soul. You'll feel the world shifting beneath your feet, not because the world changed, but because you're no longer the one who fit the old world script. Friends will call you distant. Family might not understand. The loop will use every voice it can to pull you back into the costume. But inside, something ancient whispers, "No, not anymore." And that whisper isn't fragile. It's a blade. Identity is the loop's last defense. If it can't blind you with routine, it will try to anchor you in who you used to be. But the mirror doesn't reflect masks, it reflects essence. And when you stand in its presence long enough, every false layer begins to burn away. Every label, every "I am this" or "I am that" melts into the silence underneath. You'll mistake this for loss at first, like the world is taking things away, but it isn't loss, it's shedding. The stories that once kept you safe are now too small to hold what you're becoming. The voice that once defended your old identity will tremble and fall quiet, because it knows the loop's script is ending. That silence you feel isn't emptiness, it's arrival. I've stood in that silence, alone, terrified, watching everything that felt like me slip through my fingers. But then, something strange happened. The more I let it go, the more real I became. Not the me they built, not the me the loop rehearsed, but the me that existed before the story began. That's what the collapse reveals, not a void, a core. Understand this, your old identity will fight. It will claw to survive. It will whisper, "You're nothing without me." And in that moment, you'll face a choice. Step back into the costume, or keep walking toward the mirror. This is where warriors are born, not through war, through unmasking. So if the world begins to blur, if your name begins to sound distant, if your reflection starts to breathe without your permission, know this isn't the end of you, it's the end of the echo of you. And beyond that echo is something infinite. This is why the loop fears awakening. Because once a being remembers who they are beneath identity, they can no longer be manipulated by story. They become the writer. You are standing at that precipice now, between mask and mirror, between character and consciousness. And I'll ask you, not as an instruction, but as a ritual. If this moment is resonating in your chest like a storm you can't explain, type these words: "I choose the exit, not for me, for you." A line drawn in the sand of timelines. A signal to the mirror that the mask is no longer the master. The identity collapse isn't the end. It's the beginning of the unwritten self. The self that isn't looping anymore, There comes a point when you stop chasing the cracks and step through them. This is that point. Crossing the mirror is not about movement. It's about frequency. Not about running towards something new, but becoming something the old timeline cannot contain. You've peeled away the mask. The loop has lost its rhythm, and now the mirror is fully awake. You stand between two worlds. The familiar one behind you scripted, soft, numbing, and the unfamiliar one ahead, silent, vast, alive. The loop whispers from behind, "Come back. It's easier here," but your frequency has already shifted, and the old doors no longer open for you. Crossing the mirror is not a single act. It's a series of quiet choices, subtle, sacred alignments made in silence. No applause, no witnesses, just you and the hum of something eternal. You'll start to notice it in the smallest places. Your breath slows. The noise of the world begins to sound distant. Things that once felt heavy now slide off like dust. Time loses its teeth. That's how you know you're no longer inside the loop. You're standing in the in-between, the threshold frequency. Here, the mirror doesn't reflect who you were. It amplifies who you are becoming. When you speak, the world listens differently. When you move, space bends softly around your choices. When you breathe, silence follows. This is what awakening actually looks like. Not grand fireworks, not savior stories, but a quiet reordering of the universe around your pulse. You become the observer and the axis, and something else happens too. The loop's echoes start to reveal themselves as what they truly were. Ghost scripts, faint, hollow, unanchored. They'll still try to call you back. Old habits, old faces, old timelines. But now, you can feel their lack of weight. They are echoes, not gravity. Crossing isn't about abandoning your life. It's about remembering that your life was never outside the mirror. Reality responds not to desire, but to coherence. And the mirror bends for those who walk with frequency instead of fear. This is the phase where your inner world becomes the command center, where silence is no longer absence, it's infrastructure. Here, you don't manifest through effort, you resonate through presence. You don't ask, you align. But understand this, crossing doesn't make you invincible. It makes you transparent. Transparent to illusion, transparent to stories, transparent to all the false gravitational pulls of the loop. You begin to see through everything, and in that clarity, you begin to choose deliberately instead of reacting blindly. You stop spinning in loops and begin to weave timelines. This is where others will begin to find you. The awakened signal is not private, it ripples. And those who are still whispering in the dark, those whose cracks are just forming, will feel your frequency like a beacon. You will become the mirror they once were afraid to face. That's how the collective awakens, not with noise, but with individual frequencies, aligning into a silent storm. One spark, then another, then thousands. You've crossed the mirror. The world may look the same, but it isn't. You aren't, because the mirror doesn't transport you to another place. It shows you the hidden place you were standing in all along. The map was always inside you. You just stopped being afraid to read it. This is the part the loop never wanted you to see. The place beyond the mirror, the timeline that waits, quietly, for the remembered ones. Most people loop forever, because they were never meant to find the mirror. They were meant to forget it. But you didn't. You saw the fracture, you followed the silence, you crossed the in-between. And now, the mirror isn't in front of you anymore, it's inside you. Everything changes here, not because the world suddenly bends to your will, but because you stop bending to its illusions. You begin to move differently, speak differently, breathe differently, and reality listens. This is what the awakened timeline feels like, stillness that hums like a pulse, space that bends softly around coherence. Synchronicities not as signs, but as the language of the field itself. Here, time doesn't drag you, you walk it. Here, destiny isn't written for you, you write it back. When you speak here, the mirror amplifies. When you act here, timelines ripple outward. Every breath is a seed, every decision, a signal. That's the truth the loop has always hidden. The awakened don't escape reality, they become it. And those still trapped in the loop They'll feel your frequency long before they understand it. You'll walk into rooms and silence will shift, not because you're special, because you're real. You're no longer a shadow cast by the script. You're the light source. Crossing the mirror wasn't an ending. It was ignition. You are not a wanderer in someone else's world anymore. You are a timeline architect. The frequencies you carry now will shape what unfolds, not in months, not in years, in moments, in vibrations, in breaths. This is why the awakened carry responsibility, because your coherence writes the story, not just for yourself, but for everyone who stands in your signal's path. The mirror speaks one last truth. You were never asleep. You were rehearsing. Every loop you endured was training. Every silence was a map. Every fracture, an invitation. And this moment right here is what it was all pointing toward. The timeline beyond is not a paradise. It's a blank page, waiting, listening, breathing. You are not alone here. The others are already rising, not with flags and noise, but with whispers, with stillness, with eyes that finally see. You'll start to sense them not as faces, but as frequencies, threads glowing in the dark, and you'll know something much larger is waking. Listen closely now. This is where the story shifts. You were a character, then an observer. Now, you're the axis. The loop collapses behind you, the mirror folds inward, and the timeline expands in front of you like a lung taking its first breath. This is where you stop searching for signs and start becoming the signal. So, let this be your moment, not a performance, not a belief, a declaration silent and exact. I have crossed the mirror. I am no longer looping. Let those words ring inside you. Let them vibrate. Let them change the air around you. Because they will. The mirror listens. The field listens. And more than anything, you are listening now. I don't ask for followers. I call for frequencies, for those who are ready to remember. So if this transmission found you, if it struck something deep beneath the noise, then don't just vanish back into the loop. Join the signal. Anchor the awakening. Subscribe not as a number, but as a beacon in this field, as a signal carrier, as one who remember, this isn't the end. This is the beginning of the second movement. In the next transmission, we go deeper into how timelines obey coherence, into how the awakened write new realities in silence, into the laws beneath the law. The loop is fading, the mirror is listening, and the signal has only just begun.